For this video, I would like to demonstrate a method for creating a tufted cushion similar to this. It can be useful in a variety of scenarios. So let's take this and dock it in the corner here where you keep an eye on it. Then we're going to begin by creating cube, scaling it down to something appropriate. Turn on constant shading with lines so we can see our geometry. I'm going to create 8 segments in the X and 4 in the Y in order to get the positions for our buttons. Make it editable. And with the Live Select tool, select the vertices, alternating them on each row. They're going to be the position for our buttons. Then go to the Select menu and create a selection set. We'll just name it Buttons, and we'll name our cube to Cushion. You can see that now we've got in the tagline we have a selection set of these vertices. Next we're going to create a cone with 1 height segments and 14 rotation segments. You can change this later if you want to, because all this will remain live. So now child the cone to a cloner. Scoot this down so we can see our properties better. Set the cloner mode to object. Set the cushion as the object. Set distribution to vertex, and then take the button select tag and drag it into the selection slot. Go to the cone, the original cone, and scale it down to something reasonable. Go to cloner, transform, and move the rotation P value to 90 degrees in order to get the cones intersecting with the cushion. Now you can adjust the size or penetration factor as much as you like later on after you see the results of these operations. I'm going to close up the cloner just so I don't have an overly complex object list here. And then I'm going to make the cloner, I'm going to add a bool to the list. I'm going to child the cloner to the bool. The bool is going to be, Boolean type is going to be A subtract B. So B is going to be the clones and A is going to be the cushion. So we have the cones subtracted from the cushion. This is the result that we see so far. In order to make this work, you have to select the bool, go to its object properties, and click Create Single Object. Now we can do an interactive render just to see what our results are so far. It doesn't look very convincing. So we need to go back to the bool and child it to a subdivision surface. Now you can see the effect. Looks fairly convincing right now. You can make some adjustments still in just a moment. Let's increase our resolution of the interactive render. Now you can go back, as I said, you can go back and increase the scale of the cone if you wish to make the holes larger. You can also change the rotation segments. Let's try putting 24 in there, for example. You can see it puts a lot more creases. In my opinion, too many creases, so we'll reduce that down to 18. It's not bad. Try 16. It's pretty good. 14. Kind of like that. If you go down to 10, you only get a few creases. So depending on what you want, you can adjust this rotation segment to your liking. So let's go to 14. It'll give us a few more folds here toward the corners and into intermediate points. Okay, now we need to create our buttons. So that's going to be a sphere, or scale it down to something reasonable. I'm going to rotate it in the pivot value to 90 degrees. Go to quad view so I can get some idea of the scale of it relative to my hole. So I'm going to make it something like that. I'll push it back against the cushion just to get an idea of how big it is. Don't need to have that many rotation segments, so change that to say 18. Could even go lower than that if you wanted to. Make it editable. And then scale it. To flatten it out. You can judge the size of it temporarily. Just scaling it down, something like that. And then make that sphere, we'll call it button. Make that a child of a cloner. Now we've already got a cloner set up, so we'll just use that. So duplicate the cloner. Take the button, drag it into the cloner, and to replace the cone. So now the buttons are all in proper position. Just a question of adjusting them inward. So take your position Z and drag those into your cushion. Maximize that just to get an idea of what that looks like. And you can position those as deeply into the cushions as you want, something like that maybe. Okay. Now what we want is our cushion to bulge outward slightly. So we're going to do that with an FFD deformer. So close that up. We'll close up this subdivision surface. We'll select both of these and group them. And we'll take that null and we will child an FFD deformer to it. Now unfortunately when you do this, fit to parent doesn't work. So we'll have to do this manually to fit the deformer around our cushion, which is not difficult. So grid size, we'll expand that in the X. We'll decrease it in the Y. And decrease it in the Z, and then just move it back so that it frames up our cushion here nicely. I'm going to go to Display, Garage Shading, add more grid points. So I'm going to add probably something like 5 grid points in the X, which you can adjust as needed. I'm going with the move tool, live select tool, I'll select those grid points there and pull it out. Maybe take those two end ones and push them back a little bit. See what our cushion looks like. So it looks pretty good. It's bulging out there a bit. Take those and drag them out a little bit further. And the advantage of grouping all these together before I add the FFD is that the buttons will move with the cushion instead of sinking into the cushion as I move the cushion. Okay. Now if I want to get a look at this, go to the content browser, presets, visualize materials. Visualize materials has a leather material in it. So I'll just drag that leather onto the null. I get a pretty good leather material. Single click on that material and make it cubic. And increase the tiling by twice in order to make the texture a little bit smaller. And there you have it. Let's add a light. So you get some idea of what this looks like under a light. Get a fill light on the other side. Deselect its specular and its intensity. Add some shadow to the key light. And there we go. Now if you don't like to see this FFD grid, just select the whole thing and say current state to object. And there you go. So that gives you a pretty good tufted cushion.